I hope you can see my screen. Let me switch over to these slides, and I hope you can also see the slides. Okay, can you all see my screen now? Brian, can you confirm? Can you see my screen? All right, thank you, Anzo. So all right, yeah, GitHub for beginners. I probably don't like the beginners part, but yeah, because at one moment we're all beginners, and another moment, we're all experts at the end of the day. But maybe you can ask what is GitHub, or what is Git, or what is Bitbucket. And I think I've had all this jargon thrown around once in a while. But this is Git and GitHub are more or less the same. Okay, not more or less the same, but they move hand in hand, and it is something as a developer you most probably need to know the most. I say most probably because as a developer, there are so many tools you need to work with, right? And GitHub plus Git is really one of them, and it's really high in your career. All right. So in this course, we're going to learn everything you need to know to get started with Git. If you're an absolute beginner or you have been using Git for a while but never really understood how Git works, this is for you. So what is GitHub? GitHub is a centralized workflow, meaning all developers write and code to a shared repository. So that is more like a high level definition. But maybe if I can narrow it down. So usually at Uptake, I remember like in my same one, we had like end of same project, and we had to sort of work in a group, right? But by then I used to stay in Chisugu. I had all my other guys, we stay in Nasana, Zambia, or something like that. So we're already scattered, but at the end of the day, we're supposed to work on a project. So, okay, yeah, I know how all projects go. At the end, only one person works on the project, but think of it like in my group, we actually all worked on a project. So I want to make a change, right? But maybe my friend in Zambia has the project, right? So I can't really, I have to wait for him. He gives me the files on a flash. I make my changes, and then maybe someone else has to make a change or to document something. But next thing you know, he's out of the, I don't know, city or something like that. So you end up having lagging, like work lags, and then at the end of the day, your tutor needs to the project, and you're saying, oh, you know what, this guy isn't around, and maybe he's on other files and stuff like that. So that is one scenario, and also think of another scenario whereby you have a project on your PC, or on a friend's PC, or on I don't know, your dad's PC, and let's say either it gets infected with a virus, or I don't know, your PC gets stolen, right? So you end up losing all your work. It has also happened to me, but I learned how to use it, so I was safe. And so yeah, all I'm trying to say is GitHub sort of helps us keep our code, right, or our project's code, right? It's more like I like to compare it with Google Photos, maybe, or yeah, most probably Google Photos is a good example, whereby you take pictures on your phone, and when you get like a Wi-Fi spot with good internet, you can upload your pictures. Well, so that even if your phone is stolen, right, all you need is your Google account, log into another phone, sync your photos, you have all your memories back, right? So that's how GitHub works. GitHub is Google Photos, and the photos themselves is just your code, and yeah, your code and your project, right? Uh, Are you all still with me? It's like a bit talking alone. All right. Thanks, Ezra, for that confirmation. So, uh, we have so the scenario is you have code on your PC, right? And you're supposed to transfer that code to GitHub, right? So GitHub is like our cloud storage system. So let's say you have your photos on your phone and you're supposed to transfer those photos to Google Photos, right? Just try to imagine it in that way. So basically we have code on our PC. Maybe I like web development, so I'm probably going to use HTML here. So I have my HTML files on my PC in a folder, right? And now I want to store them online. So we have like I think Google Photos has what they call albums, photo albums, something like that, whereby you can group certain photos you want, and also I think Google sort of arranges them for you in years and stuff like that. So for GitHub, it has what we call repositories, right? So a repository is just like that album, that photo album of yours, right? But for it, it will contain the code on your local PC, right? So here we can have a simple definition. A repository is an instance workflow to a developer. This is how work would be flowing to the server that holds the repository. So back to the Google Photos scenario, right? We have photos on your phone and they're supposed to fill up that folder, right? That photo album that you have on Google Photos. I really hope you're trying to imagine and see how things actually work with Git, right? So I think we'll share these files with you guys via email so that you can explore more resources, right? Hi Wesley, welcome. So that you can explore more resources, and yeah, I think. All right, so here is more context. All right, what is Git and why is it popular? So Git is a free and open source distributed system designed to handle everything from small to very large projects with speed efficiency. So Git is the most popular version control system that records the changes to our code every time in a special database called a repository. So let me get back to that analogy whereby you have your code on a PC and your PC is stolen, or you have your code and you're working in a team or like a group, right? But some guy goes out of town, or I don't know, some guy loses a flash or something like that. So Git actually keeps versions, right? Versions of your code, right? So from the time you started to the time, I don't know, to whatever time you think you have finished the project, right? So whenever something goes wrong, right, you can easily revert back to the previous changes you made. You can easily change back to the previous version you made, right? Let me give you a scenario. So let's say you give some guy the work, right? The guy had a virus in his PC, and most of the files were taken up. You guys cannot start again afresh. I'm getting my experience as the same one guy because it was a bit hard, and we're new to all the things, HTML and stuff like that. So you can't again start, looking for the template you use, the content and stuff like that. So if you have your work on GitHub, right, you can easily revert back. You can just check the most recent version of code you committed, and then, like pull it, okay, download it, and then use it, right? All right. So using Git. So we have, I think there are more than like 3 ways, but for now we shall just use what is here. So we have the command line, we have code editors, and we have the GUI, right? So I think the most easiest way right now is GitHub has an application. I think it's called GitHub Desktop. You can download it, and it saves you from using the command line. So if you're not really comfortable with the command line or terminal, you can use what they call a GitHub Desktop, right? Then you can also use a text editor or an IDE. So I think the best right now is VS Code, Visual Studio Code. It's sort of like GitHub Desktop, but it's more like integrated within the IDE, sorry, within the text editor, right? So if you want to push your code to the cloud, you can just do it from Visual Studio Code. You don't need any command line or to know any commands or stuff like that. Then the last option is the terminal or the command line or the CMD, right? So this is like most probably the best way to do it, right? But you just have to be comfortable, and it's not like no one will force you to know all the things, but it was sort of the first way to do it, but anyway, it's good to know. So you can either use the command line, you can either use a text editor or IDE. You can also use GitHub Desktop, right? All right, so as I said, command line is probably better. So why command line? GUI tools have limitations. GUI tools are not always available. So limitations, you could think of a limitation meaning software always has bugs, right? So, and also GitHub Desktop is really new, like it's really new to the market. I don't know, I think it was like released just, I don't know, either last year or a few years back. So you can imagine, I think the best bet by then was using a Visual Studio Code, which is your text editor. Then they're not always available. Like think of it, still version updates, right? Because I don't know, I think there was a bug sometime and they had to pull it off, like, okay, scrap it from the market. So whatever code you had to make, it wouldn't work, right? So yeah, those are small gimmicks of GUI, but nothing to worry about. So let's get started. So installing Git, right? So I just by the way, are we still together? I hope I'm not losing you guys. I hope you're not lost. Just confirm in the comments and let me know if at all you're lost or something before we proceed. All right, thanks Wesley, thanks Bruno. Okay, so thanks Ezra. So installation of Git, right? So there are two things here, right? And it's best to know that difference. There's Git and there's GitHub, right? So GitHub is Google Photos, right? There is also what we call Bitbucket. Bitbucket can maybe be iCloud, right? There is GitLab. GitLab can be Dropbox or something like that, right? So all I'm trying to say is there are different versions of GitHub in the market, right? GitHub is just the cloud, the cloud provider you have, right? So normally we could have like Google Drive, we could have Dropbox, we could have iCloud, and many others, right? So that's GitHub. But then Git is a command line tool that helps you run commands and do all the things. So for it, it's just one thing. So you can think of Git as maybe the programming language of GitHub, or the programming language of iCloud, or the programming language of Dropbox. All right. I hope I haven't confused you, right, with that, because so it gets confusing in the beginning, but Git is just the same, and GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab, those are different versions, but it's all the same thing, right? It's just like the way I can store a file on Google Drive, the same way I'm going to store a file on iCloud, the same way I'm going to store a file on Dropbox, right? So iCloud, the cloud providers are all the same, right? They're just different versions because obviously they're different companies, each of them wants to make money, and so on and so forth, right? All right, so I'm not going to go through installation, but there are links here. Installation on Windows, installation on Mac, I think, and maybe Linux. Let's see. So I think for Windows, it's we'll share the link still, or the slides also, so that you know where to go and download. Because for Windows, it's pretty straightforward. Download the software, double click, and install. Yeah, nothing. Then for Mac, probably it's the same thing. I don't know about Mac. Then for Linux, most probably the same thing, but usually you use the terminal for that. So, oh, if you have issues, like if you have issues later on after this, installing or anything, please reach out to me or Brooke or Brian or literally in one of the leads. We'll be able to help you go through stuff like that. All right. I hope we're together on that. Okay, Ezra, let me share that link. Brian is still here. Okay, so I don't know, Brian, are you still going to go through with this? So okay, before I call Brian, I don't know if you'll come through, but like after installing like Git, right? You need to maybe set it up like some configurations. So think of the setup in a way that you know like when you sign into your phone, like with your Gmail account and stuff like that, you have to set up like what's it called? You have to set up the backup. I think it's called backup, which enables you to back up your contacts, uh, your photos, and your files, something like that. So, Brian, are you going to take us through configuring Git?
Yes, I will do that. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So I'm going to switch to Brian shortly. He takes you through configuration, then I think I'll be back later. All right. So yeah, Brian, the floor is yours. You can configure Git, and I will proceed.
Yes. Sorry, I was on and off. I had issues with the internet, but I'm glad we're all here today. Yes. So configuring GitHub. Whenever you whenever you install GitHub to your computer, there are a few variables and a few settings that you would wish to configure on your GitHub before you start using it. Let me present my screen here a little bit. Just a minute. I'm sharing my screen with all of you. Can you be able to see my screen now?
Yes, Brian, we can see a screen.
All right. All right. So after installing GitHub, there are a few things that you wish to configure to have a smooth running and everything working out very well on your machine. For example, the first time we're using GitHub, we need to configure some things like your name, your email, your editor, and your line ending. For example, your name has to be a unique identifier. Let's say, assume you're working on a project and I'm having Brian and the other one is having Stuart. So you set your names and your email and then your editor. To configure some of these on the system, we use the commands below. Git comes with a look, or Git comes with tools that is called git config that lets you set and get configuration variables that control the aspects and the look of your GitHub. The first configuration you are going to have is called your identity. The identity consists of your username.
Sorry to interrupt. Requesting it to like the person is not able to see. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me increase. Let me increase something like this. Is that okay? All right. So the first thing you're going to configure is going to be your username. For you to be able to configure your username, you have a git command called git config global user.name. Now, someone may ask me why we are using global. GitHub comes with 3 levels of setting. There is the first level of setting is called system, where every changes you put in the GitHub settings affect the whole system. Take, for example, you could be saying it is like a gate, the gate of the house. When you close the gate, everything in the house is closed, or it encompasses everything in the house. So that is the first level of configuration. The second level of configuration is going to be global, which only applies to the current user. For example, when you say git config global username, you are setting the username for the current user, the settings for the user that is going to apply. And then the last one is going to be git config local. The git config local command only applies to the repository or the project you are working in. Take, for instance, I'm going to be opening my command prompt here. I don't know if all of you can be able to see it, and maybe increase the size.
You can increase, Brian.
Yes, please.
You can increase the text. You only increase the cursor size.
Oh, all right. Text font. Can we put it to this or this? So is that okay? All right. The command that is used for setting configurations in your GitHub is git config. That is the command that you use whenever you are setting up systems or configurations for your computer. In order to list everything in your system, you just say git config list. This lists out all the settings you have. For example, you can see that my email or my usernames are here. Username Brian, email is Kayongo, and then the code editor is code. So this is just a simple list that shows you what GitHub is or what Git commands you have in your system. And for you to configure your username, we say that it is git config, which is here, git config -- global user.name, and then you insert in your username. Let's take an example. I want to change, let's say, my username to Brian. So I would say git config -- global, and then I can say user.name, then I set it to, let's say, Brian. So by doing this, I'm setting my username to Brian, and when I it saves the name. For me to be able to see that I've changed my username in Git, I put in git config -- global user name. Then you can be able to see that I changed my name to Brian. Though I love it when it is still in Kai Brian, so I can set it back to git config global user name. Then I set it back to Kai Brian. So that is the first set of command that we are going through. The next set of the command is setting your global user email. So for you to be able to set your global user email, you use git config -- global user.email. Now, the reason why email is not having quotes is because it is one chunk of an email. There is no space. The only reason why you put space, like in this form here, is because there is you put it in quotes is because there is a space. But if you don't have a space, you could just even say git config -- global user.name, then you just put in Brian. Now that works because Brian is not separated, or it doesn't have a space in it. And when you go to git config global user.name, it will be Brian. But if I want to put a space, git config -- global user.name, I put it in quotes. Let's say Kai, then space Brian. It has to be in quotes. Don't forget about that. If you don't put it in quotes, you are going to get an error. It will think, oh, you specify in two names. Now, for the case of the email, you will not need to put it in quotes because the email is one. So for example, my email is kangbrian@gmail.com. Now, when I put it like this, it saves it because when you check here, email doesn't have any space. So I don't need to put it in quotes. So that is the first time when you're setting your identity. The identity consists of your name, the name you'll be using, and then your username that you'll be using on GitHub. The next thing we are going to use is the default editor. Now that you've done or you've finished setting up your identity, you can choose a default editor that Git will use whenever it needs to do some changes in your code. Those changes may be, for example, if you want to know the difference of the former edited file and the current edited file, you can just use a default text editor. So in order to define a default text editor, the command is git config -- global core.editor. Now you name the editor that you are going to be using. In most cases, there are different editors like brackets, Atom, VS Code, all those other editors, though I would recommend to use Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the best. So in order for you to configure Visual Studio Code as your default text editor for GitHub, you say git config -- global core.editor, and then for Visual Studio Code, you can just say code, and then it is all configured for you, just as short as this line of command. And then you've chosen Visual Studio Code to be the default code editor for your use. On the other hand, whenever you're using GitHub, it always creates a repository in the branch called master. The default branch is called master. For example, let's assume we are going to initialize. Let's initialize. Let's first create a project here. Make directorate. Let's say git try. Then we cd into git try, and then inside git try, when you initialize git, you've initialized an empty Git repository, and when you say Git branch, when you initialize an empty branch, it always begins with a master. Whenever you're working on a project, I don't know why this has not yet brought it here. Just give it a try. CD uptake, CD online school, then branch. Oh, sorry about that. I want to show you a project which has what? The branches in GitHub. For example, there is a branch called master, development, and services. Now, every time you create a new branch in GitHub, it creates on master. But at one point of time, you may want your branch different. Let's say you want your branch to be called main. In order to configure main as your main branch, you say git git config global. This is when we are setting the global part. And then when you are setting main to be your initial Git branch, you say init.default branch to be main. So every time you initialize a new Git branch, it will be coming to main. This is the code whenever you want to initialize a new repository with a different name rather than master as your name. That is all I can say about configurations of GitHub. Stuart, are you still there?
Yes, Brian. Thanks so much.
Yes.
I think we have like about 35 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, Brian,
Yes.
can hear you.
Yes, we are sorry. We are facing a few issues with the network, but let me take over from here. We are going to be writing a simple program or a simple file, but then we look at a few GitHub commands or Git commands that we're going to be using. Let me first share with you my screen or my a simple project. Let me start off a project here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Brian.
All right. So whenever you're working with GitHub or Git, we shall first create a folder. The folder is one which is going to contain all the files about our project. Take, for instance, I'm going to CD. CD is like navigating to my desktop. I'm going to go to my desktop, and then on my desktop, I'm going to be creating a new project. Let me call it maybe make directorate. Then I'm going to create a folder called gitlan or gitlan. And then after creating a folder called gitlan, I want to go to gitlan, the folder. I think all these commands are okay. Make new directorate is the same as going to your desktop and then you right click and say create new folder. And then cd into gitlan is like going to that folder and then we open it. So for you to be able to create, for you to be able to work with Git, you need to initialize a new GitHub, a new Git repository. In order to create a new Git repository, you say git init. Init is the first command. It initializes a new Git repository. So for example, here you can see it says initialize an empty Git repository in gitlan here. So if you come back to the screen and then you check for it, let me check here. I want to show it to you on the screen how it is created. Let me reshare the whole screen. Can you now see it? Can you now all see the screen? Hello, are we seeing the screen? Just a minute, just a minute. So this is what I was talking about. We initialized a new Git repository called gitlan, which is here. And then when you open it, you can find this file here called .git. Now, this .git file is very crucial in the project. And my advice to you would be never touch it the whole of your development cycle. Do not touch that file, because when you touch it, it will create a few errors in your project. So, leaving that alone, after us initializing a new file, we can go to our favorite text editor, and then we start creating our project files. For example, I'm going to be creating a new file inside that folder. I like using Visual Studio Code because it is easy to use and it allows a lot of easy functionalities. So when you come here, I can just say create index.html, index.html inside this folder. Oh, you can see index.html is here. So the new file is called index.html. So if you come back to GitHub or Git, for you to be able to check what you've done, you just say git status. You can see it says on our branch main, we have untracked files. And then the untracked file is called index.html. You can all see it here. Now, the reason why it is called untracked is because we have not yet added it to our project. And then for you to add it to your project, you just say git add. Add what? Index.html. Now, when you add it, adding is like, okay, get this file and put it to be part of the working tree. The working tree is like this. Let me present you something small here. It is like this. This is your local machine, which is here. And then you are creating that folder, let's say index.html. And on the other hand, is maybe the project repository that is going to be online. That is called a central repository. Now, for you to be able to do a git add changes or saves all the changes you've made on this file to this stage here. So git is like the middleman, where you create the files from your local file, you add them to your middleman before sending them to your central repository here. So git add is like, okay, get all that I've added, put them this side. And in order for you to save, you have what they call a git. You create what I call a git commit. Now the commit message should always be telling what you've done on your project. Take for example, I say added the index file. Now when you click enter, it tells you that one file has been changed, 0 insertions, 0 deletions, and then we have created a new page called index.html from here. Can we all see that? Hello, am I too fast?
Bern, we can see that. I don't know. Is he too fast? Is he okay?
Guys, am I too fast? If I'm fast, you can please send the message here so that I can get that. Oh, Bruno says I'm too fast. Sorry about that. Let me repeat what I was saying. Every time you create a project or every time you create a folder, you have to initialize GitHub in it. Let me first get back. Let me say I've created a new folder called learn git2. Now, for you to be able to create a folder on the command, you just say make directory git learn2. Now I've created a folder. Every time you write this command, it is all about creating a folder. Now I've created that folder. In order to go to that folder, I say cd into git learn2 like that. And since I installed GitHub, I installed the code, Visual Studio Code to be my default text editor, I can just write on the word code with a period, then I press enter. When I do that, Visual Studio Code opens up inside that working folder. You can see here it is loading like this. Now, in order to allow GitHub to track changes, of whatever you're working on in that folder, you have to initialize GitHub in that folder. For you to initialize GitHub in that folder, you write the word git init like this, and then you press enter. And then GitHub will let you know that you have initialized an empty Git repository in the work inside this folder here called learn git2. This is called an absolute path. You don't have to worry about it. The only thing you can worry about is knowing this name here. This is where the Git has been initialized. So in this case, we have initialized Git inside git learn2. Now, let's assume you have started working on a project and you are adding a new file, let's say index.html like this. This is the index page that you are adding for your project. Now, whenever you add a new project in GitHub, GitHub tries to track it. That's why you see it has this this greenish color here that you can see. Now, I use extensions. For example, I use an extension called M8 that can allow me to do short commands like I just put a period here, then I press the word tab, and then it creates for me that whole initialization of Git. I can give it a title of learn Git like this. Now the question would be, I want GitHub to know that I have created that file and I want it to track. So in order to do that, I have a command called git status. It tells me what I'm doing. For example, this one tells me that I have an untracked file called index.html. And in this message, it says in order to track it, I have to use a command called git add like this. When you say git add, the file name is called index.html. Now, when I say this, it only adds that file that I want it to track. And when I go to git status, it tells me, okay, yes, these are the changes we are tracking. Inside your project, you have a file called index.html, which called index.html, and it is tracking it. So for me to be able to commit my change, like I want it to be permanent, I just use the command called git commit. This one I want it to save the file whenever it is tracking. For example, added a new page. Added the new page index like this. So there I've committed my change, I've made it permanent. And when we say again git status, it says nothing to commute, everything is working clean on the tree. Sorry if I was fast. Stuart, are you okay? Can you Can you take us through?